Hear all of our previously aired broadcasts of News for the Soul online at newsforthesoul.com. Now let's get back to the show. And we are back. We're live, hour 3 of this Valentine's Day special broadcast day on News for the Soul. We're going to do something exciting, introduce you to another new member of the News for the Soul family. Hopefully, my mouth will work for the full hour. That will help. Talking with the angels and beyond. That's what's happening in this hour. And we're going to get to know Tanya Mosley. She is a spirit communicator, intuitive healer, and channeler. And we're going to begin at the beginning where we start all the new introductions. Tanya, welcome to the News for the Soul family.
Thank you for having me. I am so excited to be here. A little nervous, but super excited.
You will be just fine. So here we go. We're going to start with the first question where we start with everybody because it's the place that connects us together as a community and movement on News for the Soul over the last couple of decades. We all have these direct experiences with something outside the 3D norm that awakens us. And I'm curious as to what your first primary experience was and also your most profound. So wherever you'd like to take us to begin.
Perfect. So my first would probably be me waking up at 2 years old during heart surgery. At the age of 2, I had a subaortic mass. I was the first case in New Mexico. They told my parents that I wouldn't live to see my teenage years. So during surgery, I woke up actually in the middle of surgery and seeing the first, the doctors above me in the light. That's when I realized that two things. So that was the physical, and the non-physical is I had Jesus standing next to me looking over at the operating table. And that was kind of my opening with my journey here on earth. They told me that, like I said, I wasn't going to live to see my teenage years. From 2 to about 16, I was in and out of the hospital, had multiple catheterizations, 1 angioplasty, and then at 16 had a valve replacement. And the whole time lasted 12 hours. I was the first person out and the last person the first person in and the last person out. My surgery, like I said, lasted 12 hours, and they had a hard time taking me from the heart-lung machine and pumping on my own. They had to literally take my heart out of my body and get it to pump. So that was kind of the whole, the part that I leave out and I don't talk about a lot is that my life was actually extended from my grandmother. She was a master Reiki practitioner, and she found a healer in Hawaii to ask if my life could be extended because I was not doing very well with my heart and everything that had gone on. And I never really believed this until many years later when I myself got a reading, and she said to me that I wasn't supposed to be here. At the very beginning of the reading, she was flipping over cards, and she kind of looked at me and she goes, "You're not supposed to be here." And I said, "No, I'm not." And she's like, "Wow, I've only seen this a couple times." So that was kind of...
Can we back up? We like details,
Yep.
And there's a lot of stuff going on there. First of all, explain what ailment you
how far
had.
do you want to go?
Yeah,
So
well, we've got a whole hour, so we like to get detailed. So what was the ailment that you mentioned?
So at 2, I had a massive tissue that had grown around my heart, and I had leaky valves. So they had removed the massive tissue that was around my heart, and they told, because I was very young, I was 2 years old, that they couldn't do a valve replacement at that time. I just had to live with leaky valves. So my aorta, mitral, and pulmonary valve was leaking. So if you think about your valves coming together and closing, mine weren't, so the blood was sloshing back and forth. So this enabled me from doing a lot of activities as the other kids. Pretty much my parents treated me like a China doll. So I had lots of, I wasn't allowed to participate in PE. I had a lot of limitations around me. So that's when I was diagnosed with that at 2 years old. So they said my heart was very weak. So that's when they told my parents they didn't know how long I was going to live, because having multiple valve replacements at a young age isn't great. So it wasn't like a hole in the heart. I had 3 different valves that were leaking.
And so you had the surgery, just walk us slowly through the experience of when you woke up. You know why you woke up?
During the surgery at 2, no. I did not know why I woke up. The doctors both looked at me like, what is she doing up? And I remember it seeing this bright light. You know, it's really, when you talk about consciousness, like at the time, I'm 2 years old, and I realized that this was my first memory of life. Like, I knew I was in a physical body, but not really grasping that.
Right.
So, and then I went back to, but then they obviously gave me more medicine and put me back to sleep. And then I had woke up in the ICU, in my second memory of life, and kids were screaming in the hospital room. I remember I couldn't turn my head. So my mom was to my right and my dad was to my left. And I couldn't turn my head. I had all these, IVs all over me. You have one in your neck, and it was, you have all these wires coming out of you and tubes and everything else. And I remember my dad telling me, well, Tanya, look at me. And my mom's like, she can't turn her head. And I remember the kids screaming in pain. I just thought, this is awful. This is hell. Like, what am I doing here? So that was kind of the next, during the whole surgery time, that I physically remember.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now, when you said you saw Jesus.
Yeah. So that was actually at the time at 2, I didn't recognize I remembered Jesus. When I went back and did some guided meditation and did a past life regression and walked backwards, then that's when I realized, I saw myself.
So this is what we want to do. We want to walk through when you're there and you're seeing it without the overlay of the story that came later. So what did you actually see, and how were you feeling, and what was that like in the moment?
Pain. I think, during the physical, I was feeling a lot of pain. I don't remember a lot of out of my mind, like out of physical. I just knew when I was, even talking about it, I start getting dizzy. The energy starts coming in and starts getting me dizzy. How can you describe this? It's like you're floating. So you've realized that I'm here physically. I'm like, oh my gosh, here's my life. My life is beginning. I have doctors in there. And then I went into, screaming children. So it was like blips of pieces. So if you only watch like a movie, I only remember bits and pieces, but they were all really not great. So that's the part. So when the part of me remembering Jesus, didn't remember that when I was 2. That memory came back to me later in my life.
I see.
Does that make sense? Yes.
So when did it came back, during a regression, or did you actually start remembering things on your own?
Well, I did a guided meditation first of all and started remembering, and then I was seeing massive amounts of colors. And then when I went backwards and did a past life is when I realized, I was also in pain seeing the children screaming, but I was also looking at myself right the moment before I woke up, seeing these doctors in front of me and realizing Jesus was holding my hand. But there was no communication. There was just just understanding that this beautiful love and this connection, but there wasn't a communication in this is what was happening to you, right?
So let's fill in the middle bit then, okay? So after you had your surgery, you had this, what's your next sort of recollections or what happened next?
Well, so about 2.5 months after my procedure, I was, like I said, 2 years old, 2.5. I was in the back of my dad's pickup truck, and he was on the tailgate with his friends, and I fell out of the back of the truck, and I got gravel shoved in my mouth. And I remember my mom screaming. I remember falling out of the truck, and I remember then being at the hospital, and my mom is hysterically crying. She just got done with heart surgery. You have to call her cardiologist. And I remember them scraping my mouth and me having this metal like bowl plate in front of me and spitting this gravel out of my mouth. I still have the scars in my mouth today where they were scraping all this gravel out of my mouth, and I was bleeding. And in that time, this is in the early 80s, I had to have an antibiotic before any time they kind of touched me, especially had to do with blood, because they didn't want me to get an infection on my heart. So this is why my mom was in such panic mode, because I had literally been out of the hospital a few months, and now I'm back in the hospital with a bleeding mouth and gravel shoved everywhere. So that was probably the second or third time being in the hospital remembering another traumatic event.
So as you're going along, and these things are obviously happening to sort of awaken you on some level, as you're going along, when did you feel sort of through your childhood connected to that energy? Because something led you to having a past life regression later, right? So what other kind of spiritual connections or awakenings were happening throughout your childhood?
So, and this is so heady, and it's like so hard to bring human words around it. I remember a couple times remembering, like, I'm going to remember this exact moment when I'm an adult. But remembering, like, it felt like consciousness came in for a short time when I was a young child, and then I would shoot back up into the clouds. That's the best way I can describe on how I remember. And I didn't realize, I always knew I was different, and people would tell me I was different, but never really understanding that. I was always an empath and could feel kids who maybe didn't have the best home life. I wasn't raised I was raised in a town that was on the poorer side. And I knew that when situations weren't very good, and maybe there was something that was if somebody was getting abused by their father, or an alcoholic, or if somebody was getting sexually assaulted, like I knew something wasn't right. Those were kind of always the sense of knowing. Kids would always kind of look at me and they're like, well, how did you know, something that would happen? And then they'd say, how do you know? And I just thought at the time I was a really good guesser. I didn't really know I was different. My grandma was very spiritual. She was my spiritual teacher. She always took us to healers and everything. And because she knew that my path was so different, especially with my heart. So I had kind of always been around healers and intuitives, but I don't know, I just kind of just thought this is what everybody did. And I remember, I think another huge awakening that had happened is I was in high school and we had a teacher that was sexually assaulting girls, and he would come on to me, and he would just say inappropriate things with me. But he would call girls in during the class that I was in and he was teaching, because he was an assistant. And the fear on these girls' face, I knew something was going on. So this happened for a year, and I would see these same girls come in with a petrified look on their face, and I just knew something wasn't right. So about, like I said, this happened at the beginning of my sophomore year, and to the end of my sophomore year, I kind of confided another teacher, and I said, I just don't trust him. He gives me the creeps. He has definitely been talking inappropriately to me, but I think that there's maybe more things going on. And I got called into the principal's office that following Monday, and I can't reveal any of the girls' names because we were under the age of 18, but it's in, some of the newspapers, and it's in documents that. So when they called and I said, they said, we're asking about this one teacher, and I said to him what he had said to me, and I gave the list of names, and they brought the girls in one by one, and they were crying, and they put us at a secret spot of the high school where we couldn't be, where nobody would come in and talk to us. And then the police came, and it was this huge investigation. And it was extremely hard, especially being in high school and everything that was going on, with hormones and trying to feel accepted. And he was coach of the football team, and it was was so dysfunctional is the best way I can describe it. So when we were in court, after I ended up going into court, the girls looked at me and they said, "How did you know, Tanya? How did you know it was all of us? You picked us." I mean, out of 300, however many girls, they're like, "How did you know it was us?" And I said, "I knew because I had this gut instinct that something wasn't right." And I said, "I could see the fear in your eyes every time you guys walked in the door." And they said, "Thank you," because we never had enough courage to say something. So that's just one example of things that would happen throughout my life that I just knew when something wasn't right and needed to be heard. So those were kind of definitely some of my awakenings. Yes, I'd always get visited by my past, my grandma would come and visit me in my dreams, and things would knock over in the shower, and I'd see, people's hands, or I'd see energy and prints. Like, those were always kind of normal, but I thought everybody had really seen those.
Interesting. So, and how was your family life growing up?
So, I came from my parents worked hard. They did not make a lot of money. They were hippies when they got married, and they, to be frank, they didn't have a pot to piss in when they first had me. And my dad ended up getting a job and making ends meet, and we had a beautiful life. It was just stressful for my parents having to deal with my heart like this, because the closest doctor was 3.5 hours away. So I had to drive up to Albuquerque every 6 months to get an EKG, to get an X-ray, to see the cardiologist every 6 months. So that takes a lot on, parents, first-time parents, with having to find out that their kid has this, huge, I don't want to say abnormality, but a huge, heart condition. So they did well, but their marriage ended up ending when I was 12 years old. So my parents ended up getting a divorce, and I was probably more strong-minded, I guess you could say, teenager. And people don't understand when doctors tell you you're probably not going to live to see your teenage years, and you want to live and experience life. Like, that's been ingrained in my system since I was a little kid. I mean, at the age of 10, I had a list on all the things I wanted to accomplish before I died. Like, that's not most kids' normal. So,
right.
So my dad ended up remarrying, and my mom was still single. So I met my high school sweetheart, my ex-husband, very young, my junior year of high school. So I was very headstrong. That's what I describe. Very headstrong. So my mom was probably my dad works a lot, and my mom was home with us. So she was very supportive, very loving, and my dad worked really hard to provide for us.
So, in all of this, at what point did you have that meeting, and how did you end up there?
You mean say that again, with my whole spirituality?
Yes.
Perfect. So, like I said, I met my high school sweetheart, and we were too young, but I ended up having my daughter after we had married. We've been together 4.5 years, and we got married and had my daughter. So I had my daughter young, and she started seeing spirits. First word out of her mouth was talking about her spirit guide. I was the house that had the balls flying across the house, and she's talking to people, and don't you see them, Mom? And so I just thought my daughter was very gifted. So flash forwarding a few years, my ex-husband and I did not end up making it. We had 2 kids together, and I was divorced for 3 years, met my current husband, and started doing yoga. But my grandma at this point was very much alive, and we'd talk about spirituality, and she would listen and cry on, and she would, she was very healer. She was such a healing energy, and we'd always talk about spiritual things. And I started doing a lot of yoga, but have always trusted my gut and followed my instinct and my intuition. And I did some it was a guided meditation with Sylvia Brown. I got it from the library, read the book, and I did this whole guided meditation. And my spirit guide pops in. And she's like, hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm like, hey, how are you? So I'm in this meditation, and Rebecca's taking me around, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I'm telling my friends, like, you should do yoga, and you should start meditating. You'll meet your spirit guide. And my grandma's encouraging me because, like I said, she was the person I talked to. And I thought everybody who did yoga and meditated talked to their spirit guides and had this awakening. I just thought this is what you did. And my grandma, instead of telling me, no, that's not what everybody does, that this is unique, she just told me, was encouraging me. So my grandma got diagnosed with cancer, and it was stage 4 lung cancer. And she said she was going to kind of do the chemo and everything. And that seemed to work. She seemed to beat it. And she got the results in November that she was clear. But in January, and we'd talk like every other week, she'd call me and she said, so I'm seeing my spirit guides before bed. And I was like, okay. And I said, like, physically seeing them. And we both kind of knew that wasn't a good thing, that she was probably about to transition but never really said it. And she would go off on, I got your life extended. And it's something I didn't really believe. And I never told my grandma, but I just kind of let her, go on and rant and rave. And we talked about old times and how she used to work with a healer, JR, and all the stuff that she would do with me. And we found out that her cancer had came back. And she got really sick. And they thought it was just a stomach bug. She ended up going into the hospital. And I told my mom, let me know and I'll come down to Florida. And she's like, no, she'll be fine. And my husband was like, just go. So I ended up going to Florida. And by the time I had got to Florida, she had increasingly got worse throughout the day. And my mom's like, I'm glad you're here. And, of course, I got flashback as soon as I'm in a hospital because I've been in a hospital so much. It takes me a minute to adjust because it makes me sick to my stomach because of everything that has happened. So by the time I went into the IC room, I looked at her and I was like, oh, my God, Mom, she's dying. Like, why didn't you just tell me she's dying? So I asked her, I was like, how are you? And she was having a hard time breathing, catching her breath. And I asked her if her spirits guides were there, and she said no. She said she only calls them when she needs them. But they're like, oh, she's hallucinating, she's not getting enough oxygen. And they're like, she's talking crazy. And I said, no, she's seeing in between the veil. I said, the veil's thin. I said, so she's seeing the other side. I didn't know that my grandma had not told me that she had been seeing her spirit guide. I thought she had told my aunt and everybody else. And we don't get hung up on death. In my family, we know it's just a transition. So we ended up having to put her on, intubate her because we were waiting for my aunt to come from New Mexico to say goodbye. So after came and we had let her go naturally, we told her that we want her to send us, she's going to send me a heart and send my aunt a butterfly and all this stuff. So I had started kissing her, goodbye, and after she took her last breath and transitioned, I was rubbing her head and kissing her, and we were just sitting with her for a minute, and I could hear her like I'm talking to you right now, quit kissing that dead body, I'm not in there. And I'm like, kind of look around like, did anybody else just hear that? And I'm just like, and I looked at my aunt, I'm like, that's funny, I feel like I'm hearing Grandma in my head, like, that's weird. I was like, okay, that's kind of weird, and I thought, I'm just making it up. Because I just heard her voice a couple weeks ago, like, it's fine. So she would show up in my meditation. So I went home, I'm kind of flash forwarding, went home a few days, and she would show up, in my meditation. And I'm like, hey, Grandma, how's it going? And I thought, well, this is weird. Like, I'm like, am I really seeing her? Or is she just, I wasn't understanding this. So about 6 months later, I went back down to Florida, and I was visiting my aunt and my mom, and my aunt was doing this 21-day, meditation with Oprah or something. She's like, you want to meditate? I said, yeah, it's been a while. I said, so let's meditate. But before I had actually gone down to Florida, I forgot this part. Before I had gone down to Florida, about 2 months before I'd gone, right when you're about to fall asleep, right before you're about to transition into your deep sleep, a woman had came over. It sounded like an intercom in my bedroom and said, hello, Tanya. Scared the crap out of me. I woke up jolted, like, oh my gosh, who is that? Like, I'm looking around like my husband's asleep. But what was fascinating is when the woman said that, I had an image in my mind of what she looked like. And I'm like, well, that's weird. Scared the heck out of me. I was like, my heart was racing. I thought somebody had broke in. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, what the heck is happening? Thought that was the strangest thing. So I go down, flash forward, and go down to Florida. And so we start meditating. And my grandma touched physically the side of my head and pushed on my head. And I was like, hey, Grandma. And she goes, there's going to be a lady in a red dress that's going to help you with your questions. And I was like, okay. And I'm looking, I'm like, well, what if my mom and my aunt don't believe me? She said, who cares? And I said, all right. And I said, okay. And I asked her kind of what she had been doing, and she just, was saying she was busy and whatever. So after the meditation, I had told my aunt, because she showed me this flowing red dress. And I said, Grandma just came in my meditation, and this is what she said. So we saw a medium that night, and, of course, my husband's mother had came through, and my husband, by the way, is a non-believer. So he doesn't believe in any of this.
Mm.
So she comes and has messages for him, and I'm like, Lois, why are you talking to me? Your son doesn't believe in this. This isn't how you guys were raised, because they were raised very, very strong Methodist. So the next day we go to a intuitive town. It's like a psychic town in Florida. And my mom's like, oh, well, here, you can talk to the lady that I always talk to. I said, no, Mom, you felt her energy. You go get a reading. And my aunt's like, we got to find the lady in the red dress. And I'm like, if she's meant to be, she'll show up. So my mom's in a reading, and we're in this, like, crystal store. And we step outside, and across the street is a lady in a red dress. And my aunt's, like, freaks out. She's like, oh, my gosh. So I walked up to her, and I said, are you a psychic medium? She's like, yeah. And I said, we need to talk. She goes, did my boyfriend send you? And I said, no. I was in a meditation, and my grandma showed me a red dress like you're wearing and told me I need to talk to you. And the intuitive eyes get, like, so big. She's like, let me go see. And she's like, well, if I don't have any appointments, let's go up and talk. So I said, all right. So that's when I sat down. So flash forward into what I said earlier. And she looked at me, and she goes, you're not supposed to be here. And I said, no, I'm not. And I knew the only person who had knew that was my mom that was in a reading and my grandma on the other side, because nobody really talked about that piece, because a lot of people don't believe in this stuff, and especially with because my dad wasn't really spiritual. So, and I said, no, I'm not. And she's like, I've only seen this like twice. This is fascinating. So she actually picked up my donor's valve. My valve was from an 18-year-old boy who had passed away. He was still in my energy, so it was trying to get through that a little bit. And then she said, well, you're supposed to be talking to angels. And I'm like, what does that mean? I'm a business professional. I was an insurance agent. I was ambassador of the chamber. I was part of the Rotary. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, you're supposed to be doing, this work on some kind of level. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, I don't even dream about my past loved ones. And I said, what do you mean you're a medium? I thought everybody did this. And she goes, no, you're very different. And then that's when I realized maybe I'm different. And after that, I took one course with Charles Virtue. It was like an online course, like these are the steps. No, you're not crazy, just a video kind of thing. And then after that, I just would sit in meditation, and Jesus would show up. And somebody's grandmother or my grandma and all these angels would come up, and I would have to sit and I would channel and do automatic writing and listen to the message.
So walk us through the first meditation where someone showed up. The first meditation when I did that with Sylvia Brown?
No,
after you did the training, when you did a first meditation and someone showed up.
That's taking me back. There's one on the questions that was further along, but first meditation, that's going to have to take me back. A bird started knocking on my window when I asked the question, because I heard the word Debbie, and I knew Rebecca had already been my spirit guide. And I said, who was the woman who came in like an intercom over my room that scared the crap out of me? And they go, Debbie. And of course, when you're beginning your spiritual awakening, you have to fall into trust so hard. And I made this like saying with Spirit, I said, I need to see 3 things of evidence. Like if I see it 3 times in a row, then I know. And it was this thing I had set it up with Spirit. And I have a bird knocking on my window, like on my screen window. There's not a ledge, there's nothing. And I'm like, okay, I got it. So it was mostly my spirit guide because I had already walked on meditations with her, and she would hold my hand and she would lead me. And I remember Michael coming in, Archangel Michael, and he looked, and I realized that I was seeing things with my mind's eye in my mind, but I could feel the energy tingle. I'd get goosebumps. The temperature in the room would drop. So every time with a meditation, I'd sit with Rebecca, and I say, who am I supposed to know now? And they would walk in, and I'd wait for a name, or I'd do some automatic writing, and I'd wait. So they came in, and I got the name, and I would sit with them and get to know their energy and feel into Archangel Michael. And then he would walk in front of me, and he'd come in the same direction. And then Archangel Gabriel would come in, and he'd come right to my left, right close to where Rebecca was, but right next to her. And I said, and then Archangel Raphael would come in. So each time I had to get out of my head, sit into a state of trust into my solar plex, and just breathe, wait, and listen, and trust. So I would do this over and over and over again. And Spirit showed me so many times in my life that they were communicating with me, and I didn't realize it was them. I just always thought it was me. They would show me episodes in my life where, you know, the warning bells, as everybody says, the warning signs, where Spirit was saying, don't take that direction, go this direction. You were following your intuition. And people would say, how do you know that? And I just thought, like I said, I was a really good guesser, but it was Spirit saying, you were so honed into your center. And then they showed me that I had jumped with so many surgeries that I had gone on the other side, and I didn't realize it. And I knew that there was this one time I had gotten my blood drawn, and after this was, I think I was already divorced, and I already had my kids, and I had to fast. And Archangel Michael showed me, he's like, and I remember I passed out, completely went black, and I remember going to this beautiful white spot, and I was feeling, see, the words, there's no human words to just try to describe how I felt. And I remember I was getting pulled back into my body, and I was fighting and saying, no, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I want to stay in this beautiful bliss because there was no pain. I was so light, and I was warm, and it was loving, and it was so, and I just was walking more and more into this white, into this beautiful infinite space of white, and I was getting pulled back in. And that's when my spirit seems like, you saw the other side. And during the reading, that when she told me I was different, that I was talking about the lady in the red dress, she said, you were very close to, she goes, you have 1 foot in this life and 1 foot out. And I said, yeah, because I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life. I don't know why I'm supposed to be here. I said, I feel like I'm here, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm raising kids, and that's it. I don't know what my purpose is. I feel lost, like I go on one activity and I get bored and do something else. And she goes, you need to be very careful. She goes, you are not grounded. And that's when I realized I'm always living in the ethers. I'm always living in the heart of the universe, and I don't ground myself enough and stay here physically present. So maybe it was because of. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying that's a common challenge for those of us tuned in so much.
Yeah. And, our world, and sitting down and learning so much from Spirit, you learn that sometimes our world can be so harsh, and as intuitives, as knowers, as feelers, and as empaths, we feel the world should be different and know there can be so much better than what we physically see, and know that we can create beautiful things, but we are so lost in our mind and in our ego, and get lost in what it's supposed to look like instead of what it feels like, that's where we get wrapped up in our head, and we forgot to fill into our heart space.
might sound like a weird question, but it's what I'm being guided to ask. When you were describing that place where there's no pain and stuff, why the hell do you think we have to come to this side at all?
Well, I think that goes on more of what everybody believes, but we picked this for a reason. Spirit's been giving me a lot on that, in that place right there, that beautiful, light, heavenly, divine, crystalline heaven. You can experience that on earth. And I think we're here to experience the fun and the joy and the creativity and the love and really create heaven here on earth. But I feel like we've lost sight of that. So I think we came here to express, and also I know because Spirit's saying to express to being in a physical body. So many people ask me like, well, I want to see my loved ones show up, and I'm like, Spirit, we are non-physical. We're only in this physical body for a little while. And I said, when we pass over, we are not physical. They are not going to show up in physical form because they are not physical anymore. That body is either buried or has been cremated. So it's enjoying this physical body, this temple, and understanding it's a gift. And that's where I think a lot of people have the misunderstanding, is realizing that our body is what we chose, and that this is our temple, and use it wisely.
So at what point on the journey did you get clear on your purpose, and what was it?
Oh, I think I'm still constantly getting clear. I think it's ever evolving. This journey of me opening up has been evolving.
At what point did you start working to help others and do readings and what you do?
I actually got thrown into it. So pretty much after I did this course, then very next week, I ended up giving people readings in an event here in my town. That's not what I was expecting. It literally set the ball in motion. And then I kind of started with a private group page, and then Spirit said, okay, do a Facebook page. So every time I will wait till Spirit gives me like my next steps on movement. And then I end up, so I did some during my little private group page, and then I ended up opening up a business page of Facebook, and that's when I was advertising. So most of my stuff has been all online and only over Facebook. So Spirit is now guiding me to moving out of my house and finding a location out and meeting more people face to face.
Wow. So how long have you been doing readings?
So publicly being aware that I was giving readings, 2.5 years.
You've been on an interesting non-linear journey. I like the authentic reactions you express as well. You know, when the intercom person and, just having a normal human reaction. Sometimes people recount their stories as being all bliss and unicorns and fluffy clouds. But I mean, it's normal for this to be challenging. But you were so lucky to be tuned in with support people in your family for so young. That was, it's unique to have that. You're very lucky. So describe then, oh my gosh, the time's just zipping along. Describe then who's coming to you for what kind of help?
I think people like myself, that I wasn't aware of my gifts. People are saying, I hear Spirit and the veil. I mean, the veil is getting so thin. Timelines are squeezing together, and the veil is getting so thin that people are having more quote-unquote coincidences and not realizing what they are. And it's Spirit saying, hey, we're here to help you. We're here to get you out of your head, out of your stuck, out of you feeling stuck. So I feel like anybody who feels like, you know what, I'm really in a huge transition in my life. I'm an activator, and that's something I have realized probably within the past year, that I activate. I have got different healing, which I didn't realize. Spirit will give me things. I went to an intuitive, and I was just actually into it like a little psychic fair because I was trying to meet more people, and she just looked at me, and I looked at her, and she goes, I'm supposed to give you something. And I said, well, I'm attracted to you. And I said, I just don't understand our energy. And she goes, I need to give you the Merkabas. And I'm like, what does that mean? And she's like, I'm just going to place these. I've only done this once. This has nothing to do with me. You have to go figure it out. And I'm like, lovely. So I've had to sit with Metatron and figure out all about the Merkabas. But it's just healing modalities that Spirit has given me over time with massive amounts of more higher levels of healing. So I think anybody who's needing expansion on their spiritual gifts or trusting, that's what I tell people, our soul is our navigation system on earth. Everybody is designed with the knowing. It's just I help like open that up and remember kind of what your gifts are and what kind of you're here to do, even though I think that, like I said, changes all the time, because one minute we may feel like we're doing this and then we grow and evolve into something else. So I tell people, if it makes your heart sing, then follow it, because that's the most beautiful thing you can do. Following your intuition into what feels good. Don't think, feel.
Well, give us an overview of your process, what's all involved, what kind of modalities you're employing, and just the whole overview.
So I give, yes, messages with healing, but as soon as you step into, and people may be feeling this listening, I open channels and the energy runs through. So it shifts you to help, yes, slow down, Spirit's helping me here, help move stagnant energy within your energy and also your physical. And I give messages, from the other side. I don't particularly like to talk to past loved ones or do mediumship readings. It does come in, but that's not usually where I like to sit. And then lots of energy healing. I do lots of energy healing, but a lot of people come to me for messages about, next step, evolving, and a lot of energy healing. So I do a lot of sacred geometry, crystal healing, lots of high-level energy that's coming in, lots of star energy that's been coming in, the heart of the universe. Feels kind of metally, so like metal, I guess you can describe. So lots of high level. I work with indigenous people. I have a team on the other side of indigenous people, so I do high level indigenous wisdom healing. I was granted that. So yeah, lots of different things, and everyone's like, I don't know what to do, or I don't know which one I should do. I said, go to one of my services that you feel drawn to, and we'll just sit down for 30 minutes and see where Spirit guides. So I don't get hung up on names. I don't like to use clairs and everything else, because I like basic words, seeing, hearing, smelling, because we all use these. So I don't like to get hung up on language. I like to sit with people and talk about, how does this move you? How do you feel? What comes up in a reading or in a message or in a healing is divine timing, is exactly what we need to cover at this moment. A lot of unfoldment that happens when I sit with people.
So what do you foresee the unfoldment of your show as we move forward?
So, like when you reached out to me, which was funny, the night it was Christmas Eve, and it was this full moon, and talking about all of our intentions. And I laid in bed and I asked Spirit, I said, I want to be able to touch more people's life with the messages that come in my channeling message, because most of my stuff is video. And I said, I want to reach more people with whatever spirit you want to bring at the moment and whatever I can channel in. And I said, I want to reach more people, throughout the United States. And Spirit goes, what about the world? And I was like, okay, fine, the world, whatever you want. And then you reached out to me like 2 weeks later. So I don't have a goal. I kind of leave that up to, I throw energy, and wherever it sticks is where it's supposed to stick, and whoever feels like, whatever it feels like to you, great. And if I'm not your person, find somebody else who makes your heart sing. So I don't know, growth, reaching more people, remembering. Like, I don't have any. I'm just going with the flow, because I find that in the beginning I was very hung up on what it's going to look like, where am I going to, and that's not living in the moment, that's living in the future. And that's where I've really been trying to focus, is flowing with the energies and moving to wherever my happy space is. So I'm trying not to launch too much, even though I get things very future purpose, I try to also live in the moment.
Yeah. Well, going with the flow means you're getting out of the way and letting spirit guide drive the ship. So that's how we try to do things here too. As much as is possible anyway. Let's talk a little bit about big picture right now before we do our final section here. The world right now, as you mentioned, the veil's thinning. That's an understatement.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about in general on this show for over 20 years about what we thought it would look like and feel like. It's a lot more intense and challenging and life and deathy than we thought it would be. What is your kind of overview of where we're at globally, energetically, and consciously on the planet right now?
So I'm going to say this before I answer that question. A couple things to know about me. I don't have a muzzle. I'm not going to lie to you, and I'm never going to tell you what you want to hear. I only tell you what I see, what I hear, and what I feel. So with that said, I feel like things are going to get a little worse before they get better. So we have a huge transition coming in 2020. And then when I channeled the other day, in 2030, we have another. So like even talking about it, I have a pain in my heart. A lot of people are exiting this planet this year, ready for this shift that's coming in 2020. And if they are choosing in their, soul contract, and if they just choose to get out, there are lots of people that are exiting this year. 2020 is going to be, a movement year of movement and definitely a fulfillment, and 2030 is going to be even more intense. They don't show me a lot of things with that because I am also in a human body and I have children and I get emotional. So I don't want to see too many things that, I still have to live here. So yes, they show me things about the earth. About the weather and things that are coming that are impacting. A lot of times spirit will come up, and I talked about it on my show the other day on my video, President Kennedy comes in and wants the whole truth and wants me to write it. And I'm like, I don't want to mess with that. So lots of stuff about government, lots of stuff that I don't want to get my hand in that. You know what I mean? I don't want to dip in all that kind of honey. So, and yes, sometimes I see it, but unfortunately I do think that it's going to get a little worse before it gets better. But the children that are coming in now, and it's fascinating to watch the generations, they see this world so much differently. And these energies that are coming in to help us bring awareness. I think it's one of those, when you dig yourself a hole and the only way to look is up. I think we're getting close to the bottom, and we'll be looking up soon. Just things, and I say this all the time when I give readings. Spirit gives me things very, very quickly, and they look at me like, why haven't you got this done yet? And I said, well, I'm a human, and this is human time, and you've never been in human form. So when I see things, last year it was about 3 to 6 months out time frame, because I'm trying to have the consciousness of the world to catch up. So that's why I said don't get stuck on a timeline, because the world's trying to catch up, and they are definitely slower than what spirit is.
I think that's the general consensus of the overview you gave. In a nutshell, in a couple of minutes, what would be your most important takeaway for people maneuvering through these energies right now in a good way?
Fall into your center. Fall into your I call it your soul, your center, and breathe. Listen and trust. Things that come up are what spirit is wanting you to address. Don't hold on to things. Don't make it like I'm going to age myself, but the cassette tape, rolling it over and over in your head. Let things pass by. Follow things that make your heart sing. Move in beautiful ways. Don't stay in stagnant energy that no longer serves you. Trust that and feel that there's so much better, and believe in yourself. Trust is probably the strongest, most powerful word next to love, that can be also very challenging, but breathe. And it's very cliche, but meditation can bring and unfold in beautiful ways. I just kind of talked about it. What meditation does and falling into your center is it's looking at aspects of yourself without a judgment. It's moving out of your head and into your heart, into your center, where you look at things objectively and you look at things about your life, but staying in a positive mindset. Think meditation. And I talk about this because a lot of people, I can't sit and meditate. And I said, that's fine. You don't have to have an om or meditate. It could be connecting with earth, taking a walk, but doing something that feels amazing, because that's what energy attracts. That's what people want to go to, that things that make you, that feel good.
Okay, so here's where we're at. Final 5 minutes of the show, we do something called shameless self-promotion, coming from the High Center Heart Service, knowing that in this moment there's someone listening that needs to hear what you're about to say, and this is their singular opportunity to hear it. Coming from that place, we want to get you to do shameless self-promotion about whatever you are offering right now, any kind of special events or anything going on with your services that you want to let people know about. This is your time.
Okay. So this is what I did not want to do, but Spirit is pushing me. So talking about stepping out and following your intuition, I have a piece of paper that fell out of my desk today that talked about my 90-day unfoldment period. Something I wasn't going to bring up. I just kind of pulled my basic, 30-minute service, but Spirit fell and pushed me so hard that the paper fell out of nowhere onto the floor today. So the 90-day unfoldment is where we meet face-to-face on a video, either Messenger or Skype, and it's 12 sessions. We meet for about 30 minutes. Usually I go over because Spirit comes in. The program is designed for the individual. It is not where you watch videos and everything else. I sit with you. We move energy. We help you accomplish your goals. I may do energy healing. I may do a reading for you, but it's accomplishing, I am tired of feeling like this. I want to feel like this. Where are you at and where do you want to go? So I accomplish all your goals in 12 weeks, sitting with you face to face every week for 30 minutes. So that's kind of my one-on-one coaching, but it's designed for the individual. So at the very beginning, first call is I channel, okay, what goals are you wanting to accomplish? And then I channel your guides and your spirit team and say, okay, this is what Spirit wants you to look at. Usually it's what you and Spirit want, but sometimes Spirit sparkles and more things that they're wanting to look at. So I have that for $13.33 a month. See, I don't even know what my prices are. It's on my website, talkingwiththeangels.com. That's where you can kind of sign up for that. And all my videos on top of this are on my YouTube page, Tanya Mosley, or Talking with the Angels and Beyond. That's also on my Facebook page. So I'm many places, many videos, all places to find me. But if you're interested in that coaching program and you're feeling like, okay, I'm going to say yes to myself and I've been guided to do this, check out my website, talkingwithangels.com.
Which, of course, is all linked up at newsforthesoul.com. Have we posted anything about your 90-day unfoldment program?
Yes, you did, which I thought was also comical. I was like, of course she got guided to do that. That's fine. So thank you very much.
There you go. Well, that's Spirit guidance. They tell us what to do here as well. So there you go. So the 90-day unfoldment details are all there. Newsforthesoul.com. Look for Tanya Mosley. And on the homepage, you're on today's show page. Today was awesome, Tanya, getting to know you and your story. And I think great things are in store. We're going to have exciting adventures with you on the air.
Yes, thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
Our pleasure. And looking forward to next time already. Be well, and we'll talk then. Tanya Mosley, all linked up at newsforthesoul.com. We're back with more right after this. Hear all of our previously aired broadcasts of News for the Soul online at newsforthesoul.com. Now let's get back to the show.
You're listening to News for the Soul Radio, life-changing talk radio from the uplifting to the unexplained since January 1997.